The sun is at rest near the center of the universe, and that is the Earth, spinning on its axis once daily, revolves annually around the sun. This is called heliocentric, or sun-centered system. Galileo Galilei was an Italian astronomer, physicist, engineer, philosopher, and mathematician. He was born on February 15, 1564. He played a major role in the scientific revolution of the 17th century. To prove most of his discoveries, Galileo used his telescope. He is most often incorrectly credited with the creation of the telescope. Instead, he significantly improved upon them. He would play around with spyglass, which excited him. The telescopes he made allowed him to see with a magnification of 8 or 9 times, whereas the telescope in the day only provided a magnification of 3. Galileo proved many discoveries. The first 17th century discovery he made was observing Mars through a telescope. He became the first person to use it for astronomical purposes. Galileo was the first to observe the rings of Saturn in 1610, but was unable to identify them. He thought the rings were handles, or large moons on either side of the planet. On January 7, 1610, about an hour after sunset, Galileo pointed his telescope towards Jupiter. He saw 2 tiny stars to the east of Jupiter and 1 on the west. Galileo studied these stars for 6 days and finally clearly identified what we now refer to as Galilean moons. After discovery, Galileo quickly published the results of his observations in a very readable English translation. Needed to prove the most famous Galileo discovery of the 17th century, Galilei needed to observe Venus and its phases. Using his telescope, Galileo found that Venus went through phases, just like our moon. The nature of these phases could only be explained by Venus going around the sun, not the Earth. This observation virtually proved that the Earth was not the center of the universe. It was this theory that angered the church leaders at the time. Around the end of 1610, Galileo was one of the first to discover sunspots. Christoph Scheiner claimed sunspots were simply undiscovered planets of the sun, occasionally crossing in front of its disk. Galileo argued by saying that sunspots could change their shapes and that they are often seen to originate on the solar disk and perish there. Galileo's observations strengthened his belief in Copernicus's theory that Earth and all other planets revolve around the sun. Most people in Galileo's time believed that the Earth was the center of the universe and that the sun and the planets revolved around it. The Catholic Church, which was very powerful and influential in Galileo's day, strongly supported the theory of geocentric, or Earth-centered universe. After Galileo began publishing papers about his astronomy discoveries and his belief in heliocentric, or sun-centered universe, he was called to Rome to answer charges brought against him by the Inquisition. Early in 1616, Galileo was accused of being a heretic, a person who opposed church teachings. Heresy was a crime for which people were sometimes sentenced to death. Galileo was cleared of charges of heresy, but was told he should no longer publicly state his belief that the Earth moved around the sun. Galileo continued his study of astronomy and became more and more convinced that all planets revolved around the sun. In 1632, he published a book that stated, among other things, that the heliocentric theory of Copernicus was correct. Galileo was once again called before the Inquisition and this time was found guilty of heresy. Galileo was sentenced to life imprisonment in 1633. Because of his age and poor health, he was allowed to serve his imprisonment under house arrest. Galileo died on January 8, 1642. Galileo's 17th century inventions affected modern-day science and society.